Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Hiring managers of Reddit. What's the most strange or cringeworthy thing a potential candidate has said or done during the interview? My first management job in IT, it was around 2001 or so. Hiring a general Windows/Solaris sysadmin. One guy comes in with a huge backpack. Do the interview, he's clearly on the spectrum, but I like him okay. Pretty smart, functional. As he's leaving, I casually ask, "What's in your bag?" He then explains that it's mostly O'Reilly books that he brings to all his interviews so he can prove people wrong if he needs to. I embolded my favorite. Based on a survey published via the internet, here are some of the odd things reported by HR professionals. 1. Said he was so well qualified that if he didn't get the job, it would prove that the company's management was incompetent. 2. Stretched out on the floor to fill out the job application. 3. Brought her large dog to the interview. 4. Chewed bubble gum and constantly blew bubbles. 5. Candidate kept giggling through serious interview. 6. She wore a Walkman and said she could listen to me and the music at the same time. 7. Balding candidate abruptly excused himself, returned to the office a few minutes later wearing a hairpiece. 8. Applicant challenged interviewer to arm wrestle. 9. Asked to see interviewer's resume to see if the personnel executive was qualified to judge the candidate. 10. Announced she hadn't had lunch and proceeded to eat a hamburger and french fries in the interviewer's office. 11. Without saying a word, candidate stood up and walked out during the middle of the interview. 12. Man wore jogging suit to interview for position as financial vice president. 13. Stated that if he were hired, he would demonstrate his loyalty by having the corporate logo tattooed on his forearm. 14. Interrupted to phone his therapist for advice on answering specific questions. 15. Wouldn't get out of the chair until I would hire him. I had to call the police. 16. When I asked him about his hobbies, he stood up and started tap dancing around my office. 17. Had a little pinball game and challenged me to play with him. 18. Bounced up and down on my carpet and told me I must be highly thought of by my company because I was given such a thick carpet. 19. At the end of the interview, while I stood there dumbstruck, went through my purse, took out a brush, brushed his hair, and left. 20. Pulled out a Polaroid camera and snapped a flash picture of me. Said he collected photos of everyone who interviewed him. 21. Candidate asked me if I would put on a suit jacket to ensure that the offer I had made was formal. 22. Said he wasn't interested because the position paid too much. 23. While I was on a long-distance phone call, the applicant took out a copy of Penthouse and looked through the photos, only stopping longest at the centerfold. 24. During the interview, an alarm clock went off from the candidate's briefcase. He took it out, shut it off, apologized, and said he had to leave for another interview. 25. A telephone call came in for the job applicant. It was from his wife. His side of the conversation went like this. "Which company? When do I start? What's the salary?" I said, "I assume you're not interested in conducting the interview any further." He promptly responded, "I am as long as you'll pay me more." I didn't hire him, but later found out there was no other job offer. It was a scam to get a higher offer. 26. An applicant came in wearing only one shoe. She explained that the other shoe was stolen off her foot in the bus. 27. His attaché case opened when he picked it up and all the contents spilled, revealing ladies' undergarments and assorted makeup and perfume. 28. He came to the interview with a moped and left it in the reception area. He didn't want it to get stolen and stated that he would require indoor parking for the moped. 29. He took off his right shoe and sock, removed a medicated foot powder, and dusted it on the foot and in the shoe. While he was putting back the shoe and sock, he mentioned that he had to use the powder 4 times a day, and this was the time. 30. Candidate said he really didn't want to get a job, but the unemployment office needed proof that he was looking for one. 31. He whistled when the interviewer was talking. 32. asked who the lovely baby was, pointing to a picture on my desk. When I said it was my wife, he asked if she was home now and wanted my phone number. I called security. 33. She threw up on my desk and immediately started asking questions about the job like nothing had happened. 34. Pointed to a black case he carried into my office. He said that if he was not hired, the bomb would go off. Disbelieving, I began to state why he would never be hired and that I was going to call the police. He then reached down to the case, flipped a switch, and ran. No one was injured, but I did need to get a new desk. I interviewed a leprechaun once. He was a short, somewhat overweight guy that was of Irish descent, had red hair and a beard. He chose to wear, of all things, a green suit to the interview. It was hard to keep a straight face, especially when my interviewing partner mentioned a rainbow table, cryptography, and said our code was gold standard and lamented the construction going on at the Cloverfield exit near the office. I work at a group home. Guy comes in with an impressive 4 years of nursing on his resume, but hasn't worked as a nurse in a decade. I ask him why he stopped working as a nurse. Our pay is much lower. He responded that he was fired for taking the pain meds he was in charge of giving to patients, resulting in the patients not receiving their meds despite him signing that they had. When we told him he would theoretically be responsible for med administration, he said he didn't think it would be a problem because he was no longer an addict. Previously, in the interview, we told him the job required a vehicle and clean driving record because we transport clients. He said he didn't have a license because he couldn't afford a vehicle. This would change, of course, once we gave him the job and he could save up for a vehicle. When we told him it was a requirement for hire, he became very upset and ranted about the catch-22. Also, he was 45 minutes late, sweating through a very ill-fitted suit, which was completely overkill for the position he was applying. It was my first interview, and we haven't had many better candidates. If you are desperate for a job, Google group homes in your area. There are always openings. When asked about strengths and weaknesses, the candidate replied, "I crave KFC and often get myself a bargain bucket." I just didn't know what to say next, let alone whether they considered it a strength or a weakness. I've had some ridiculous interviews. One older white woman said, "Will I have to work with Middle Easterners?" And she pointed to a guy outside the meeting room. The guy was of Indian heritage, but was born here. I said, Mike's not from the Middle East. Her in a whisper, "You know what I mean, brown people. I work for a tech company." Another guy seems nice during introductions, and then I ask my first question. "That's your first question? You're not gonna ask about the break in my experience?" Me, "No. I care about whether you can do this job, not what you've done the past year." Him, "But why wouldn't she ask that first?" Me, "Because I want to know about the work you did at this other company." Him, "Well, I wrote a novel, you know, and it got published. Do you Google me and know that already?" Me, "I Googled you, didn't see anything about a novel, and that isn't pertinent here. Can you address the question?" Him, "The movie rights were optioned. I've just finished my second novel. I'm looking for a publisher. Want to know what it's about?" Me, "Not right now, maybe late." Him, "It's this great story." Me, "I'm sorry, you're gonna have to leave. If you can't tell me about your practical experience, you're not suited for this role." I used to work for a tech support company that did phone-based calls, and we had one really great guy who was Indian but born in the US, as were his parents. Looked every bit like he came from India that very day, but spoke fluent in plain English. However, you could always tell when he got that one collar. "Yes, my name is Sanjay. No, I live in the US. I was born here." "Sir, we're in the same state." "I am not in Bangladesh. My parents are from Minnesota." At my previous job, I was interviewing candidates for a position within my team. One of the applicants was internal, so I knew of her and she had a few cats as pets. So the day of the interview arrives, in she comes, and we start with the basics. I then ask a few competency-based questions, and she starts to give answers, not based on her work experience. She had trained overseas teams and had an impressive CV, but relating the answers back to her cats. For example, I asked, "Can you give me an example of your leadership skills?" I ask you not, her answer was along the lines of, Well, I have 2 cats, and around feeding time, I need to make sure cat 1 gets fed first, as cat 2 has a weight problem and will try to eat cat 1's food. I need to ensure I lead by making sure cat 2 is kept well away from cat 1 until he finished his food. She then shows me a picture of the cats in question. Don't get me wrong, they were some mighty fine beasts. Cat 2 was a fat old F, and I have a pet cat, but I was a bit surprised. I did get some decent answers from her on occasion, but it was a very surreal interview. She didn't get the job. Okay, I need to add this one. I'm an IT director. I was hiring an entry-level position. I had this one guy come in fresh out of a correctional institution. He was around 6'6", 250 pounds, ripped muscle-wise, half-sleeve tattoos on both arms. We talked for a little while. He wasn't a very technical person. He was one of the better ones in the batch. What I mean by that was he was very personable and friendly. This was a desktop support position. I thought to myself, well, he was honest, he got popped for possession, showed me a coin that he has been going to meetings and is sober now, offered to have me talk with his sponsor. We can teach him the easy stuff. I then asked him a few situational questions. This is where, it stumbled. Me. So, you are at a user's desk and they are getting really frustrated that you haven't solved an issue that takes you normally 10 minutes in the 90 seconds you have been there. How do you handle the irate user? Him. I tell the user, please be patient, I am working on it. Me. After 3 minutes, the user says, will you please get someone competent here? I have real work to do. He is actually starting to get visibly ruffled at this point. Him. I tell him it shouldn't be long, I'm still working on it. Me. Why are you still working on it? Just click a few buttons and be done. Call someone up that can actually fix this now. Him. I tell the user to go F themselves, and if there's a mother effing issue, I'll beat the F out of them with their own chair because they need to understand effing respect for people. I didn't hire him. I really wanted to have my own IT pit bull, but the next candidate was actually perfect for the job. Alright, it wasn't during an interview, but a kid looking to get hired at my store came in and asked to speak to me. I was out the day he came in, so he asked my coworkers the next day I would be there and planned to come back. Well, 2 days later, when I was back, he came in with his grandmother. Now, this didn't bother me at first because we have hired some kids who were too young to drive but had a good head on their shoulders. What did bother me is when the kid stood by the door and the grandmother came to talk to me alone. She started having the interview for him when I didn't even plan on giving the kid an interview yet. She handed me a resume that I'm fairly sure she designed in paint and started spouting off all of these really admirable traits about this kid. Meanwhile, he stood by the door and looked straight down at his shoes. She told me what a hard worker he was, how quick of a learner he was, and because this was a retail job, she tried to tell me how personable he was. I ask you not, this lady looked me dead in the eyes with her grandson standing 50 feet away and tried to tell me he was great with people and that he had no problems approaching anyone. I was stunned. I kindly told her that I would keep his resume on file, but at the moment, we were not looking for any new employees. So she thanks me and shakes my hand and walks over to her grandson. She whispers something in his ear and he walks over to me. He doesn't say a word and just sticks his hand out at me. I went to shake his hand, but I'm not entirely sure he understood the concept of a handshake. I was grabbing his hand and shaking while he just let his limp, clammy hand sit on my grasp until it was over. He then turned around and left. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all of the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.